Welcome back to part 2 of Media Molecule's Dreams Analysis. First, I would like to point out that Media Molecule is from now on holding a weekly Twitch streams through which they are presenting new info about the game and the development team. But since lots of stuff is still hidden, I will continue with this analysis, and will also try to take into account new info revealed in the streams. Although whatever we cover now is already a thing of past, just like seeing a star in sky which is in fact dead at the time we are seeing it. But this does not fully apply with dreams, since whatever is presented in this video, which is based on couple months old E3 showing, is now just better and even more full of life. So aha, games 1, celestial bodies 0. It was already stated on Twitter and stream that there are lots of new tools which are still in the development. What we saw in E3 trailer was created using a set of tools that were far from being complete. So we can expect that many new possibilities and graphical enhancements will be added and revealed at some point. Okay, but enough of this intro talk and on to analysis. In this part of analysis, I would like to focus on one of the key features of the create mode that will be used in the game, and that is sculpting or modeling of in-game objects. In order to be able to create 3D digital worlds full of life, flexible and powerful tools are essential. On a computer you can always use a 3D program, but the thing is that creating any meaningful 3D assets which are ready to be used in a game engine requires a certain level of technical proficiency. To be creative in a 3D program, you first have to be technically skilled. It's an imperative. And learning 3D software is a daunting task for lots of people and requires commitment, since using the software is not an intuitive process. Until Dreams, none of the user-generated content games try to genuinely tackle this problem. The requirement for user-generated content games is simple, but hard to pull. You need to have tools that are powerful and versatile, but that are also easy to use, because the point of user-generated content games is accessibility. The tools definitely have to be much simpler than the professional game making or asset making programs. So far, when it comes to creating 3D assets in user-generated content games, developers opted for the easy way out. For example, in Project Spark, another user-generated content game that was published by Microsoft, users didn't have the opportunity to create unique 3D objects, since the whole system was developed as a free-to-play model in which users would buy asset packages that are used for creating user-generated content. But there are some problems with this approach. First, you are constantly paying for new assets because a small development team has to keep on creating them. But what I think is even more problematic is the fact that lots of user-generated content in this type of games starts to look the same, since the variety of assets is very limited. Hardest accomplishment in such cases is actually achieving the unique look that would differentiate your creation from the others. And even though you can generally do some modifications in order to avoid the limitations set by the system, such undertakings are usually just a sign of finding creative solutions, rather than the system being built to exactly support that goal. So for example, in LBP2 you could also technically create 3D worlds, although that would not even be possible without a glitch, since the game did not support such toolset. And even though LBP3 removed the glitch obstacle, the whole engine was still not developed for 3D gaming. So creating 3D games was again more of a "oh, you can do also that" kind of a thing, rather than having any real capacity to support the creation of aesthetically meaningful and functionally easy to navigate 3D worlds. The problem is that you have a 2D input, be it with a mouse or with a controller, which should somehow translate to a 3D object, and there is no easy way around that. On the other hand, try taking a pencil and start sketching. No one needs to explain to you how it all works. You have a direct relationship with the pencil and the paper. And this same approach of direct involvement between you and your creation is what Media Molecule is aiming to accomplish. You know how cool it is when Harry Potter flicks the wand and immediately something happens. It looks so easy, just a flick of a hand is all it's needed. On the other hand, if he was doing a 10-hour incantation just to cast a small spark of light, then that really wouldn't be as cool, and wizard fights would be a drag to watch. So Media Molecule always cared about making the process of digital creation as immediate and as physical as possible. And with Dreams, it looks like they are that much closer to achieving that goal. So from what we have seen, the tools of craft in Dreams will be simple but powerful. And what's even more important, they will be fun to use.
Within 2 seconds you feel like you've made something beautiful, and that's what we're trying to make the technology do for you. You start creating with a few brush strokes and you're like, I feel amazing, I didn't know I was this good at creating. Everyone will feel like a legendary artist within 5 minutes.
One of the key reasons for this is the decision to go with motion controls in order to achieve 3D input. So you will be using Move or DS4 controller to bring your ideas to life. And you can bet that both of these options will require a camera for 3D input. Also, even though we have seen a little bit of sculpting with DualShock 4, it is evident that this is more of an added possibility for those not having a Move controller rather than being the preferred option. Move controller will probably be the best option of input when sculpting or animating objects. But when it comes to playing games, the situation will most likely be a bit different. And yeah, I'm getting a bit ahead of myself, but since I mentioned play aspect just now, do note that in some of the bubbles it looks like the camera movement is actually controlled by the Move controller, since the jerkiness of the camera can be hardly achieved with a joystick input. While in some other bubbles it looks like DualShock 4 is the main input method, so it seems that for gameplay both methods of input will be equally acceptable. But we can be pretty certain that the DualShock 4 will be the standard choice for playing the game. So, to get back on the creation process, it can be safely assumed that we will not be creating sculpts by using sticks, but rather by using motion controls. And that will be a completely natural thing to do, just like sculptors in real life would sculpt with their whole hands engaged. Unfortunately, when technical demo for Dreams was first shown at PS4 reveal, people were a bit skeptical because it involved motion controls. There is this stigma surrounding motion controls, because core community just perceives it as a casual thing. But the difference here is that unlike most of the motion controlled games, which are based on wild flailing and uncontrolled movements, in Dreams you are using motion controls in a completely different way. The point is that motion must be precise, intended and focused. And these are the same reasons people love sticks. It gives them this sense of being in control. But what is different is that now you will be using motion for achieving that same sense of immediate control, which would otherwise not be possible with sticks when sculpting in 3D. This freedom of being in the moment, of opening yourself before this empty slate of never-ending possibilities is something that hardly any game tries to replicate. And motion is one way to make the process of digital art creation become more human-like. Now, the idea itself, to use Move controller to sculpt objects, was present in the very early PlayStation Move tech demos, before the Move was even launched. Although till now, this possibility wasn't properly realized in any game. But when it comes to the whole package of what is needed to create that feeling of sculpting, question of input is just one aspect then. We could also talk about immersion, for example. Since people will be sculpting 3D objects on a 2D screen, the effect of real-life sculpting is somewhat diminished. But when it comes to improving the feeling of presence and being in the moment, there is something peeking just around the corner to solve that issue. And hey, shoo, not now, not now. But more on that in later parts. Okay, so now you have these two Move controllers in your hands, and the process of sculpting seems pretty intuitive. Although it was not presented in detail, we can safely assume that one Move controller will be used for sculpting, and the other for rotating the objects around their axis. Of course, we are talking about an ideal setup here, but there will most likely be other alternatives for control with a DualShock or with only one Move controller. We can also expect that the sculpting tool will have a standard repertoire of different brush types and sizes. And there will most likely be a possibility to form lines in a grid-like setting, since some of these perfect geometrical objects would otherwise not be possible. The option to use symmetry will also probably be included, since some of the objects have this nice symmetrical look to them, and also from the fast-forwarded edits it is evident that they are symmetrically created. So we are going to be sculpting by adding or subtracting material from a sculpture. Other sculpting techniques, such as pushing, pulling or smudging, that are pretty common in ZBrush, have been crossed down and won't be used in the game, since they would cause further complications with the engine. But even though such techniques aren't available, we have previously covered how sculpts can be made more interesting by changing splat densities. and this makes it possible to further alter sculptures and give them a somewhat different look. For example, in the stream we saw how Alex transformed the sculpture of a head in many ways with just a couple of slider modifications, and suddenly you have a hairy dad who was just seconds ago bald, but will now sue the hair toning company since he started to grow hair on his nose and all other parts of his body. As a matter of fact, why stop there? I think this will also be easily achieved in Dreams. But then again, they showed something similar when introducing Little Big Planet, so maybe they will go with something else. Okay, I think we have seen quite a number of examples how wonderfully detailed these sculpts can actually be. It is both amazing and inspiring knowing that all these assets were created by the in-game tools, and that the visual quality and fidelity of what is seen here is something that users will also be creating in their dreams. And even if you don't consider yourself to be creative or to have a skill for 3D creation, the most important fact is that you will be able to take other people's creations and just add something to them, change them or have fun with improvisations. What's also important is the flexibility of the split engine, which can give you this loose look, which is more forgiving and does not necessarily require you to draw 100% correct representations. All of these factors only additionally contribute to the tools being even more accessible and easy to use. But now that the process of sculpting is completed, what do you actually do with all these sculpts? Well, you can send them to a 3D printer if you need a solid companion in your real life, or you can use them in your dreams. And they covered in the tech demo reveal how simple this process should be. You just take your sculpts and place them in a scene. What is crucial here is how they will handle micromanaging thousands of sculpts cluttered in one scene. They should be easy to pick and reallocate to different positions when the creator chooses so. And I really hope they get this right, since at this stage it does seem like the artists have to find their way around when they want to change the position of something in the scene. But with proper UI and some guiding features and proper selection tools, I'm sure this can be easily remedied.
Grab those trees again, just see you can move them, see how they're in a sort of, oh, that's one block. And he just was basically, can you get the light ones? They're too hard to pick. They are. But you can fly.
Okay, now let's talk about this wall. It contains both concept shots and in-game pictures. But what amazes me is that at first look, it is not that easy to distinguish one from the other, which just speaks volumes about the harmony between the engine and art side. For example, those pictures in the lower left part of the wall look like a painting, but they are actually taken from one of the bubbles in the E3 trailer. Dreams have this beautiful painterly look, obviously inspired by these imaginative concept arts. The art director did a number of abstract color studies, and this just shows how important color is to Dreams. It's not just here to texture in an empty object, it seems almost as if it has a life of its own, a life that continuously tries to break from the shackles of the borders of the commonplace objects. In Dreams, perception is not only ruled by physics, but art changes the meaning of what color can truly be. But so far we have only seen texturing of this guy in the E3 reveal, and it is clear how the color is slowly being added to the sculpt. Although by looking at this in slow motion, the process may look arbitrary and unruly, but I am certain that we will have a high level of control when using the painting toolset. Just see this sculpt with all the details it has. It just shows how much precision the tool will allow. But on the other hand, stressing over all the tiny details is not the most fun thing to do. And fortunately, we have already seen results of the automated process with only a small texture samples. For example, when you look at this zombie scene, you could imagine that painting the ground was pretty cumbersome. But if you compare these textures, it seems that certain line segments are just constantly repeated. Just compare these grouped lines and you will see that in fact they are always the same. The artist didn't have to draw this whole scene manually. Identical technique is also applied in this forest dream. For example, this high grass is just one sprite that consists of two strict parallel lines, repeated many times with different rotations. Now notice how the clusters move, and you can easily distinguish each sprite. The same principle is also applied on lower grass, although there are a couple more lines here to make everything more diverse. Also, look at the bushes in the back. They are just one brush stroke. which is clustered and repeated many times, and set as a simple animation but with different offsets. So if I were to make a guess how this automation works, I would assume that we probably create an empty sculpture and then choose the texturing for it, and with some sliders decide in what manner this sculpture will be populated, like deciding on density, movement, arrangement of textures or any other important variable. But the whole painting tool will not only be used for texturing, as you will also probably create UIs with it, and maybe it will be used as a base for creating different effects. Also, extending painted parts to a larger environment is perfect for big 3D worlds which somehow need to be filled with something. You really can't expect casual users to be creating all these super detailed worlds with extraordinary amount of details we are used to seeing in high-profile games. And that is the reason why abstraction and concept of dreams so nicely comes to play here. You just abstract your ideas and create a background scene in a short amount of time, and move on to other important parts of your dream. Little bit of abstraction and you create just as powerful imagery, as if you were spending hours on it. Notice how sky, which occupies sometimes more than 50% of screen, is not some boring flat colored surface. It has a character and life to it. There is this constant mixture of colors coming into play while we focus our attention on other details of the dream, so the effect is pretty significant. It brings atmosphere to the overall picture, but creating it is pretty simple. Okay, so lastly, now we come to the question of how will these textures exactly be created. We have yet to see this painting tool in action, but if we take into account that LBP Move already introduced a painting tool, I believe that whatever we see in dreams is going to be based on the same principles, but taken to another level, which will open even more possibilities for the creators. So now, after covering the process of creating sculptures and textures, I have to know that there are still a couple of visual tools missing from this picture, like creating visual effects or modifying lighting, but I will cover those in later parts. But before I wrap this up, I just want to highlight one other part of the stream, which I really took notice of.
It's also really important when we've been working on this art style to also get the essence of that person. So everyone's style, you can really get your style into the game. You can tell, you know, the level that I made, the level that you've made, and that's really important, that the art can cope with that.
Yeah.
And I think we've definitely got. You can tell when someone, you know, you can tell when Francis has made a level and when I've made.
Go and fly around a bit because this level.
Basically, they are acknowledging the fact that the tools are so versatile and powerful that they will have capacity to support creators in expressing all their unique artistic visions. Just this idea should be something that pushes the community to produce inspiring creations that will continually change and evolve. This will have a huge impact on what the identity of dreams is. But as of now, dreams are an empty slate that are free to become whatever dreams can be. So it's no wonder that they are calling this game their moonshot. They are firing from all angles, and the poor moon doesn't even have a chance. But when you think about it, who needs moon when you can play dreams? Pleasant dreaming, guys. See you next time.